Gary, thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for being interested to come and listen to me talk about myself in the next 30 or 40 minutes. If I see people start walking out the door, I'll know that I should speed things up a little bit. You know, Gary, I started coming to this event about a year ago and realized that it was a good thing to come to once a month. My dad, as Gary mentioned, was a big supporter of this group, and I guess served as sort of one of the founders of it way back when. And yeah, I've really enjoyed being part of the group, and I was honored to ask to come speak. Although, you know, frankly, I get a little bit self-conscious about these speaking engagements, and I thought to myself, you know, what could I possibly tell this group of car guys about cars and auctions that they don't already know about? But I suppose it prompted a little bit of self-reflection, and I started thinking about my last 12 or 13 years being in the collector car auction business, and sort of reflecting on some of the interesting cars that I've been fortunate to be involved with and projects I've been involved with over the years. So I'm going to go through and sort of share with you a little bit about sort of some interesting things that I've been involved with, and then talk a little bit about Broad Arrow Group, the company that I co-founded a little over a year ago, about a year and a half ago. So just as a little bit of background as to how I came into this world, I never anticipated making a career out of being in the collector car auction business, although that's how things sort of played out. Originally, like most of us in this room, I wanted to be a Formula One driver. But my mom and dad never really let me race go-karts when I was a young kid for reasons that I don't fully understand. But anyways, it became apparent pretty early on that was probably a pipe dream and wasn't really going to happen. So from about the time I was 11 or so years old, I settled on wanting to be an automotive journalist. And fortunately, I had some very, very good mentors in that arena through my dad. And my dad was great friends with David Davis, who had worked for Car and Driver, founded Automobile Magazine. He was a great mentor of mine. My dad also was very close with John Lamb at Road and Track, and Tom Bryant, guys like that. I suppose I was on that track. I went to college and got an English degree at Santa Clara University, even though I already knew how to speak English. That's what I did in college. And I was sort of on the track to go work for Road and Track. I spent a couple of summers in my college years working for Motor Trend first. I did 2 summers at Motor Trend when they were still owned by Peterson Publications in West Hollywood, and then spent my final college summer working for Road and Track in Newport Beach on the old building on Monrovia Ave, where Cycle World used to be. This is back in the 2002, 3, 4 era. And long story short, I graduated college in 2006, and a couple of things sort of happened around that time. One is that nobody really told me, I guess nobody wanted to crush my dreams and told me that being an automotive journalist wasn't really a very good way to make a living. And the other thing that happened, you know, I went to college from 2002 to 2006, and when I graduated in 2006, this was sort of around the time when print journalism was dying a pretty quick death at that time, and the internet was really replacing it. And by the time I graduated college, it became apparent that being an automotive journalist was not really going to work. So I didn't really know what to do with myself. I graduated in 2006 and found myself a little bit lost at sea. I ended up going to work at the Toyota dealership in San Francisco Toyota, where I ran their call center for 2 years, and went home pretty much every night and drank myself into oblivion and tried to forget about it, and woke up the next day and did it all over again. And this was really a period of self-reflection. I was trying to figure out, you know, what the hell could I possibly do where I could earn a living and do something that I actually enjoyed. And, you know, we had gone, of course, to the Monterey Car Week every year of my life. And, you know, my dad, who many of you know, and I know many of you, but I don't know a lot of you, and I guess, thank you, Gary, for the very kind introduction. My dad, Martin Swig, was a big car guy involved in vintage racing, concours events, buying and selling historic cars, even though that wasn't his business. He was in the retail new car business. But I remember back when I was a kid going to Monterey, the auctions were sort of like, this is in like the 90s and the early 2000s. And maybe it was just that my dad didn't really like auctions and kind of poo-pooed them. But the auctions were sort of like the red-headed stepchild of Monterey Car Week, and at least my dad was sort of very always negative about the auctions. But then we came around to this time where I was out of college and looking for a job and trying to figure out what to do. And around this time, the auctions in Monterey, I was observing, were sort of becoming more and more prevalent, and bigger, more significant cars were coming up for sale and selling for more and more money. And it occurred to me one day, that what I had grown up around and what I actually knew about was these old cars. And maybe I could get a job like writing descriptions or doing photography or maybe even consigning cars for one of these auction companies. So I zeroed in on Bonhams at the time because I'm a Bay Area guy and I didn't want to move to LA and go work for RM or David Gooding, both of whom I interviewed with at the time. But Bonhams, back in 2010, was based right here in San Francisco on San Bruno Avenue. So I thought maybe I could go work there and stay in San Francisco and learn a little bit about this auction thing. So that's what I did. I went and I got a job at Bonhams. And so I went down there for the first time. I had been chasing these guys for months, and they would never call me back, and they would never email me back, and I couldn't get anywhere. And we were down at the pre-reunion races in Monterey, and I'd been writing to this guy, Mark Osborne, who ultimately became my boss. He would never have the time of day for me, would never return any communication I sent to him. So I'm racing at Monterey for, I think, I don't know, we were at the lunch at the pre-reunion, at the Bonhams lunch, and I found one of the guys with a Bonhams name tag, and I said, "Which guy is Mark Osborne?" And he said, "Oh, it's that guy over there." So I went and talked to him. I said, "Hi, Mark. I'm the guy who's emailed you 14 times. You never emailed me back, and would you allow me to buy you lunch after Monterey, and maybe we could talk about me getting a job with you?" So he said, "Yeah, okay, sure, whatever. Call me when we get back to town." I remember I went to lunch with him, and he looked at me in his British accent. And I knew about cars, I had been around cars, but I didn't know really anything about the business of collector cars. I didn't know how to negotiate a deal. I didn't know what went into writing these auction catalog descriptions. So I was really sort of flying by the seat of my pants. And I remember we went to lunch, and he looked at me at lunch, and he said, in his British accent, he said, "So David, if I just turn over to you a 4.5 litre Bentley and tell you to go verify the car and manage the editorial and work out the description, would you feel comfortable with that?" And of course the answer was no. I had barely knew what a 4.5 litre Bentley was. But I looked him right in the eye and said, "Yeah, Mark, no problem. That would be just perfect for me, and I would know exactly what to do." And he said, "Oh, okay, well maybe we'll consider hiring you." So a couple months went by, and they ended up making me a job offer, which was actually for less than I was making at San Francisco Toyota. But I was so desperate to get out of there that I took the job offer, and in March 2010 became a junior specialist at Bonhams in San Francisco. So I went in for my very first day with Mark, and I remember I was very excited to get all this training and learn about the car auction business and really how to do it. And I went in there for my first day, and he brought me into his office, and he said, "Well, David," he said, "there's one thing you need to know. It's that I'm not a manager. I'm not going to tell you what to do, and I'm not going to give you any sort of direction whatsoever. You're expected to be a self-starter, and I'm happy to give you advice, but don't look to me for any real sort of direction." I thought, okay, well, we'll see how this is going to work out. But later that day, he came out to my desk with a stack of papers, probably almost 2 feet tall, and these were all the history files for a collection of cars that ended up being the feature of the 2010 Bonhams Quail Lodge auction, which was my first major auction I was involved in. And this was the Michael L. Amalfitano collection, which was a gentleman on the East Coast who had died, and this was an estate collection. And Mark basically explained, here's all the history files, and you need to go through them all and sort out what's important and what's not. And here's the phone number of a guy named Doug Nye in the UK, and you're going to work with him and basically put together all of the catalog descriptions on these cars. And the highlight of the collection was this Porsche 917 Inter-Series Spider. And so, you know, for me, I thought this is pretty cool because, like, literally yesterday I was in the Toyota dealership talking to a lady who barely spoke English about her broken headlight on her Toyota Prius. And today I'm talking on the phone with Doug Nye about writing a catalog description on 917. So, you know, this was pretty good, and I thought this was a pretty good start. So anyways, that was sort of my first project in the auction industry. This was a shot of the sort of main cars in the Amalfitano collection. There were actually a number of other cars that were not Porsches, but this was really my first project in the industry. And these were some of the highlights: a 962, a 75 911 RSR, the 917 Inter-Series Spider, a 908-02 Spider that actually got sold, I think, in the Middle East before the auction, and a Porsche 910. So this was really my first introduction into sort of research and figuring out what these cars were, and also learning that a lot of the people who I grew up thinking were such great guys, some of them actually weren't such great guys, and there was actually a lot of things below the surface that weren't necessarily apparent on the face of it. Many years later in my career, that 917 came up again, and this is sort of a recurring theme that as you spend time in this business, you get to know not only the people and the cars. And many of these cars you see, you know, at one time, and then 10 years later they come up fully restored and they won at Pebble Beach or something like that. Well, in this Amalfitano collection auction, we had that 917, which that car wasn't originally a Spider. Actually, originally that car was a Golf 917K coupe that raced at Le Mans in 1970. And in that very same auction, there was a bunch of Porsche spare parts, and that included a complete 917 body. And somebody bought the car and bought the bodywork and put two and two together, and about a dozen years later, the car reemerged looking like it did in Le Mans 1970. So kind of funny how you develop a relationship with these cars and you get to know them in their various iterations over the years. And you're going to have to bear with me, I don't have any notes for this presentation. I kind of just put some photos on the screen and I'm going to talk about those, but this is sort of a stream of consciousness presentation, so I hope that's all right. I had 2 glasses of wine, so I'm feeling good to go. You know, for the first year that I was into business, my job ostensibly was to consign cars, but as I said, I mean, I knew about a lot of the cars, but really didn't know how to actually do a deal or negotiate a consignment. And for the first year or so, I really was just helping with the editorial, writing catalog descriptions, researching, going through car history files, and really learning a lot about the back end of the business and what went into establishing provenance for these cars and writing their descriptions. I got pretty lucky, I guess, in 2011. I had a good friend of mine here in the Bay Area who introduced me to a client in Japan who didn't speak English and who had a lot of really interesting cars in Japan. And my American-Japanese buddy invited me to a party on his boat in Monterey Harbor, and this is Monterey Car Week 2011. And he introduced me to this Japanese guy who didn't speak a word of English. And I remember sitting on his boat in Monterey Harbor 2011, and he was explaining to me that this guy had the last McLaren F1 GTR Longtail, and he was interested in selling it the following year in Monterey. So we did this deal basically on a handshake on this guy's boat in Monterey Harbor. And this is one of the very first cars that I consigned, and it was a pretty big deal for me in 2011, 2012. My first big consignment was this McLaren F1 GTR. This was the last of the long-tail GTRs they produced, chassis number 28R. This car was on the cover of the Bonhams Quail Lodge 2012 catalog. It ended up being, in the moment, a huge disappointment for me because I had done all this work to get this car, and it actually didn't sell in the auction. we actually ended up selling it later that afternoon. It would have been hindsight is 20/20, of course. I remember telling my mom, you know, Mom, this would be a great thing to put some money into, because I think this car is going to be worth a lot more in a few years. And at the time, we sold it for well under $5 million. And in hindsight, I wish that my mom would have listened to me, because this car would be well north of $20 million today. But anyways, quite a good memory. This is over 10 years ago now, so it seems like a long time, but this was a great early win for me in the business. There's me talking about the car on a video. I remember we took the car down to Laguna Seca. Unfortunately, didn't get to drive the car on track at Laguna Seca, but I did get to spend a day doing a video. I think this is the first car I ever sat in front of with a video camera in front of me talking about it, so I guess way to start at the top. In 2014, I got to be involved in the sale of the Maranello Rosso collection, and this was the collection of a guy by the name of Fabrizio Violatti, who was an Italian gentleman who had a fabulous collection of Ferraris, mostly 50s, 60s, and 70s. He also had the biggest collection of Abarth cars in the world at that time. And the highlight of the collection was his 250 GTO. He was, I believe, the second longest term owner of a 250 GTO. He bought this car, I think in like 66 or 67. I think it was chassis number 3851 from memory. Anyways, this was Baum's Quail Lodge in 2014. This sale was also a little bit of a disappointment to me, because at the time I had been, one of my jobs at Baum's, they figured out that I knew how to talk about the cars on the auction block. And they had me working as the reader, which is basically the guy who stands next to the auctioneer and tells the audience about the cars. And I was supposed to announce this auction, and I was supposed to have a laser pointer. I don't know if I have one. Anyways, oh, okay, well, that's Robert Brooks, who was the, well, he bought Baum's. He founded the Brooks Auction House. He was a great guy and really a mentor to me in the business. And this day, I was supposed to be on the stage next to Robert announcing the auction. I was very, very excited to announce it, because I think this was the first time a 250 GTO had sold publicly since about 1991 or 1992. So I remember the night before the auction, I was really fired up about that. And then the morning of the auction, Robert comes in and he says, you know, this is really an important sale, and I just decided I'm going to take the whole sale myself, so I don't need a reader. I'm going to read and auction the whole sale, and you can go work on the phone desk or whatever you're going to do, but basically, David, you're out of this deal. So I didn't get to announce the 250 GPO, but I did get to be involved, and that was really a great experience. At the time, it was the most expensive car ever sold publicly. I think it was $38.1 million in 2014, and just being involved was really an honor. I remember I was shocked that the Monterey County Fire Marshal didn't shut this auction down, because we were way over the fire codes. People were just packed into this place, and it was quite an experience to be involved in that. Then, after I had been at Baum's for about 5 years, I finally figured out that I was providing a lot more value to them than they were providing me in financial compensation. So one day, I didn't have another job to go to, but one day I walked in and I said, you know what, guys, you don't want to give me a raise, and I've worked here for 5 years, and I don't think I can do that anymore, so I quit. And it was a big brouhaha, and 10 minutes later, Robert Brooks is on the phone to me from London, and he said, you can't quit, we need you, and you need to come to London and have lunch with me so we can sort this out. So literally the next day, I was on a flight to London. I went and had lunch with Robert Brooks, and he said, well, you know, we really value you, blah, blah, blah. And we noticed that you're a halfway decent racing driver, so one of the perks that we're going to give you is we're going to prepare a car for you to race in the Goodwood Revival. And I thought, okay, well, that's kind of worthwhile. Maybe I'll stick around for that. I had never been to Goodwood, so I thought, you know, that's cool. So the car that they prepared for me was a 1959 Riley 1.5, which is sort of a British version of a Volkswagen Bug. And you can see me on the third row here with the white stripe and the red roof. This experience really went well until it didn't. But it was a great experience. I'm sure some of you have been to Goodwood. Still, I would have to say, and I've been to a lot of car events in my life, the Goodwood Revival is far and away the top, most exciting car-oriented event of any type that I've ever been to in the world. I got the chance to race at Goodwood a couple of different times. This time I was in the St. Mary's Trophy, which is a saloon car race from the 1950s. This was a two-part race where we had an amateur driver, which was me, and then you were paired with a pro driver. I was paired with Derek Hill, Phil Hill's son, and this is in the amateur portion of the race. Actually, some of the amateurs, which are generally the owners of the cars, were actually faster than some of the pro drivers because they knew them so well. I had never done a race where there was a standing start. I mean, they don't do that in this country. That was kind of different, but I actually figured out the standing start. I was running about 5th or maybe 6th, which is not bad at Goodwood. And like I said, it was going great until it wasn't great. So I included a little video here, which hopefully will play, which is a little bit of comedic interlude of how this situation panned out. All right, if Gary can figure this out, great. Otherwise, oh, there we go.
Well, another little pan out. So here we are on the grid with the A40 of Mike Jordan between the Jaguars of 14, North, the AWB, both Albert Pence car and the old John Coombs car by one. The BMW John Clark didn't get away, suspect a clutch problem. Just check it out, just a look at the back. They've got all scored on grass.
So again, I've got the little white stripe on the roof there.
And out of the slipstream, the lead jag came Mike Jordan. His lead was not very long at this point of the race.
These guys are really fast. It's shocking how quickly these guys are going. These are all pro drivers, and it's quite intimidating being there.
Outside of Justin Law, at full water, Phil Clark was talking to Richard Shaw's sister Ross to see if just sideways for Dave Swig.
Yeah, so the car had a hot rod MGB engine that was putting out about 180 horsepower. But they hadn't thought to upgrade from the BMC A series to the B series bigger rear axles. And that was pointed out to me after the wheel came off in the chicane. It's actually a miracle nobody got hurt because, as you saw, the wheel and the axle went bouncing on the pit straight and then bounced over towards the crowd on the driver's left side of the track. And I remember a British guy came up to me because where Sterling Moss sat, he had sort of an enclosure with all his VIPs, which was right on the driver's left side of the track. And a British guy came up to me after the race. He said, he said, had your wheel decapitated Sir Sterling, Lord Moss probably wouldn't be invited. And that was fairly obvious. So that was that. I did get to go back there one more time. Robert had prepared a Triumph Dolomite Sprint for me to drive when they did the first 70s British Touring Car Championship revival at the members meeting. That car didn't make it through even half of the warm-up lap, so I'm not going to show that here. So after that whole experience, I ended up leaving Bonhams because an opportunity came up for me to go and work for RM Sotheby's. This was in the early part of 2015. RM had merged with Sotheby's and were wanting to hire somebody up in Northern California. So I went and left and joined RM in 2015. One of the first projects that they dispatched me to, I was sent up to Medford, Oregon area to go do an all-day video shoot for a car that was going to be sold in Monterey. And this was the 1953 Jaguar C-Type Works Lightweight. This is one of the 3 Works Lightweight cars that Jaguar built as their team cars for Le Mans 1953. This is the car that finished 4th overall at Le Mans that year. This was really a great day. We started filming at 4 in the morning, and I don't think we wrapped till about 8:30 at night, one of those real long days in the summertime up in southern Oregon. Over the course of the day, we did a lot of driving video with drones and stuff, and I got to put almost 100 miles on this car, which as a historian of racing, you know, to get to drive in a Works Le Mans 50s race car was really something pretty cool. I remember I freaked out at the beginning of the shoot because I could barely fit in this thing because the steering wheel is so big and the compartment for your legs with the shifter is so small. I got in it and I could barely drive it. But you know, you make things work, and anyways, it was a great day and a great thing to be involved in. In 2016, I consigned my first major collection. I've done a handful of single-owner collections over the years. This was a deal down in Riverside, California. This was the Riverside International Auto Museum, which was a father-son project. The son was really the driver of the museum. Unfortunately, kind of a sad story. He got some sort of illness and died very young in his 50s, and there was really no money to keep the museum open and going. So ultimately, the museum board of directors consigned all the cars to auction. At the time, this was the largest collection of Maserati cars in the United States. The sort of feature on the Maserati end was their MC12 street car. And then they also had a number of Dan Gurney's All-American Racer Eagles. And the most significant of those was one of the first Eagle Indy cars, the 66 number 31 car that Dan himself drove at Indy in 66. So we got to sell that car. That was a great project and really a lot of fun. It was my first collection, so very memorable to work on that. In 2016, we had done a deal with the British Broadcasting Corporation where they wanted to do a reality TV show basically following around car specialists and chronicling what it was about to go and find these cars and negotiate deals on them and then bring them to auction and all the hype and fanfare and all that stuff. This was a really fun project to be involved in. I filmed a number of episodes with the BBC. You know, at one time I thought that this was going to bring some sort of fame and fortune and that we were going to take off. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, it didn't really work out. There was a husband and wife team who were the producers of the show, and towards the end of season 1 they got divorced, and the whole thing kind of went to hell in a handbasket, and BBC canceled it after season 1, even though I thought it had pretty good legs. Nobody's heard of it now. I think you can probably find a couple episodes online, but that was really a fun project to be involved in, although I wish it had worked out a little bit better. You'll note on the playbill here the Jaguar D-Type. So this was a car that was owned by the same owner as the C-Type Lightweight that we had sold in 2015. And when he wanted to sell this car, which I believe was 2017, I guess he thought I had done a pretty good job with his C-Type video, so the owner actually wanted me to come back and do the D-Type. This was the Acuria Cost D-Type that had won Le Mans overall in 1956. So they said, well, can you come back up to Medford and can we do a video on this D-Type? And I thought, great, yeah, like, this is awesome. And I remember that I got to drive the C-Type like almost 100 miles, so I thought this is going to be really great. I'm going to get to drive this Le Mans winning car and be on video with drones flying around, and this is going to be a great project. Well, I did do the video, but it wasn't quite what I anticipated because I got there and we started the shoot that morning at like 5 in the morning, and the owner's sort of car handler pulled me aside and he said, David, we need to talk. And I went over and talked to him. I said, well, what's going on? He said, look, I'm really sorry, but you're not going to be driving the D-Type at all today. And I thought to myself, well, that's odd. I thought, you know, and I asked him, I said, well, what's the concern? Is it that the car is worth so much that the owner is concerned about the risk of me driving this car on the public road? And he said, no, the owner has no issue with you driving the car. He said, you know, the owner was looking back at the C-Type video and thinking about the D-Type, and the owner remarked that you're a very tall guy, you're like 6'3", and the D-Type is very small inside, and if you drive the D-Type, you're going to be sticking out of the car, and the owner is concerned that if a tall guy is interested in the car and watches the video and you look awkward sticking out of it, that they might not want to bid on it. So you're not going to drive it, we're just going to have you sit on the stool in front of it and talk about it. So I did get to drive the car off camera a little bit, but unfortunately not on camera. But anyway, just kind of a funny story of why I didn't get to drive that car. This was somewhere up in the cuts, and Oregon, outside of Medford, on some old bridge, and I think one of the BBC producers took this photo. I think it's the only photo that I have with this car. So I did get to be involved, but I didn't really get any on-screen time in the D-Type. This car was ultimately sold for a little over $21.7 million in 2017. This is a local picture. I included this because this was something I did in 2018. One of my favorite cars. This is a Maserati A6G Zagato Berlinetta. I've always been a fan of coach-built Italian Mille Miglia era cars, and certainly Zagato cars specifically. This is a car from a great friend and client who I've worked with over the years. This was a car that, as I recall, had actually run in one of the period Mille Miglia races and then had been restored to a Pebble Beach standard. This was a great day. We sold this car in 2018 for about $4.5 million. But what I remember more than that was this day we spent filming it, doing video and photos, not far from here up on San Bruno Mountain. This is actually, it's a shame because the pandemic has made this location a casualty. You used to be able to pay your $6 and drive up to, on Radio Road, up to the radio towers that you can see if you fly out of SFO or drive up the freeway. It's